You may have noticed that it's actually taking longer before we see any of the data or the image for each of these Pokemon to load. And that is unfortunate that we had to trade a better experience for the image loading for a worse experience in the performance of when the user can see their data. Let's get an idea for why this is happening. If I pull up my network tab, and I'm actually going to enable the real API so we can hit an actual backend server and take a look at the requests as they come in. So I'm going to say window.use real API is true. And now we're going to be making actual network requests to get the Pokemon data. So if I click on Pikachu here, we're going to make this GraphQL request. And then we load the Pikachu image. And that is exactly our problem. So we first go get the Pokemon data, and that Pokemon data has the image URL in it. But you'll notice something about this image URL. It actually includes the Pokemon name. So we actually have all of the data we need to start making this request for this particular Pokemon's image, and we don't have to wait for the image to come back in the data, because waiting is making the whole thing take longer before the user can actually see and interact with that data. And it's very possible that the API you're working with for images doesn't have that nicety, but you can actually put a proxy server in between that could map the data that you have to that particular image. So you could get this same sort of thing yourself as well. So what we're going to do is I'm going to come down here and I'm going to change this create Pokemon resource API a little bit. I'm going to make this a data resource, and then I'm also going to have an image resource. I'm going to grab the image resource that we created up here and stick it right here. And remember, this create Pokemon resource is getting called inside of our get Pokemon resource, which is called right here. And so we'll fire both of these off at exactly the same time. Now we just need to determine what that URL is, and we can take a look at this and copy and paste some of that. But I actually have a little function that we can use that I'm going to pull in instead. So we'll say get image URL for Pokemon. We'll come on down here, say get image URL for Pokemon with that Pokemon name. And then we can return data and image as an object here. And then all the places where we're using that Pokemon resource, we can just update those to reference the data for the place that needs the data. And then here, we actually don't need this image component anymore at all. We can just get rid of that completely because we can use a regular image component and say Pokemon resource.image.read. So remember that image now is this image resource. So we're going to read that resource. And the only difference that we have now from what we had before is that image component was suspending and managing that resource with the resource cache. And now instead, we're creating this resource at the same time we create the resource for the data, which means we fire both of these requests at the exact same time. So we completely get rid of that waterfall effect that we saw before. So let's go ahead and save that. I'm going to do a hard reload here. We're going to go to slow 3G. We'll clear all this out and we'll move this out of the way. We'll choose Pikachu. We get that loading state here. And Pikachu shows up, and that was actually a lot faster than before. We get Charizard, and Charizard shows up, and Mew shows up. So things are working a lot faster than they were before, and that is because we no longer have this waterfall. You can actually see it right there. That's when we loaded Pikachu. We're loading Charizard, the image, and the data at the same time, and the data is still loading faster than the image, but because we started loading the image earlier, we're in a much better place overall. In review, all that we did here was we got rid of that image component that we had before because we could actually create the resource much earlier. And so as soon as we create this Pokemon resource, we know exactly everything we need to be able to start preloading that image. And so we do that right here as soon as possible. And then we returned a data resource and an image resource. And then we used that data resource here and that image resource here. And because they fire off in parallel, the whole experience is much faster.